They told me it was just a routine maintenance job, a flickering power line in one of the older government buildings. Nothing unusual, at least that's what they said. But when the soldier handed me the access slip, my eyes locked onto one line that didn't make sense. Room 13B. I had worked in that district for nearly a decade. I knew every blueprint, every substation, every forgotten stairwell. There was no room 13B. I asked lightly if it might be a mistake. The soldier didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. Instead, he said, "Don't ask questions. Just fix what needs fixing." 2 hours later, I was walking down a hallway I'd never seen before. It was windowless, sterile. The air buzzed not just with electricity, but with the feeling that something wasn't right. When we stopped in front of a reinforced steel door, the soldier used a retinal scanner to unlock it. Above the handle, a small plaque read, "Department of Applied Psychological Research, Level 4 access only. I'm just a repairman." But I followed the wires. And what I found inside, it changed everything I thought I knew about my country, about myself, about what we're truly capable of. When fear becomes a system, my name doesn't matter. Even if it did, I wouldn't be allowed to speak it anymore. For most of my adult life, I worked as a low-tier electrical technician in one of Pyongyang's inner districts, District 5, reserved for mid-level party members and government engineers. I was never important, but I was trusted. And in a country like mine, that's more dangerous than it sounds. I wasn't born into privilege. My parents were factory workers in Hamhung, scraping by on dried corn and powdered cabbage. But I did well in school, particularly in physics and electrical theory. The regime noticed. I was handpicked for a state technical institute, trained with military precision, and assigned to infrastructure projects tied directly to government housing and internal logistics. That's how I ended up in the Unit 513 maintenance team. We handled restricted circuits, meaning any power system tied to government compounds, military research centers, or party housing blocks. We didn't ask questions. We were trained not to. I was good at my job. Precise, quiet, obedient. And because I never failed an assignment, I was granted small privileges. Monthly meat rations, a second-hand Japanese radio, and an apartment just 2 floors below the local communications officer. I knew how to keep my head down. I never spoke out of turn. I smiled when spoken to. I bowed when expected. That's what survival looks like. People like me, technicians, delivery drivers, sanitation workers, were ghosts in the system. Always there, always watching, never seen. And that invisibility, it kept me alive. Until it didn't. Most days were the same. Wake up before sunrise. Boil water on the stovetop while the electricity flickered on and off like an indecisive ghost. Dress in my gray uniform, press the wrinkle from my collar with a warm teacup, then report to the Unit 513 dispatch office before 7 a.m. sharp. We'd receive our assignments on thin carbon paper, usually routine, faulty fuse boxes, weather-compromised wiring, power reroutes for visiting officials. We never touched anything outside the assigned scope, never opened what wasn't ours to open. I liked the predictability. It made life feel manageable, even if it was small. On Sundays, I would visit my younger sister, who worked at the public library, a government-controlled reading hall with only pre-approved material. She had a soft voice, always carried boiled chestnuts in her coat pocket. We'd sit on a bench near the river and talk in whispers, pretending not to notice the Ministry of State security cameras above us. My apartment was modest but enviable by local standards. 2 rooms, a working electric stove, even a fan for the summer months. I hung a poster of a waterfall on the far wall, not because I liked waterfalls, but because it made the room feel less like a box. Every now and then, I would listen to foreign static on the shortwave frequencies. Just the edges of voices. Nothing clear. I told myself it was curiosity. But really, I think I was trying to remember what the world used to sound like, before silence became the only safe language. I didn't hate my life. I had work. I had purpose. I had just enough comfort to believe that survival was good enough. But that belief was fragile, and all it took was one room, one assignment to crack it wide open. It began with a sudden knock at my door, 3 sharp raps, too precise to be random. I opened it to find a uniformed officer, not from my department, holding a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a dispatch order, stamped with the seal of Division C. I had only heard of Division C in rumors, whispers, among older technicians who mentioned secret circuits and unlisted facilities. The order simply read, Assignment, Electrical Stabilization. Location, Facility Block 7, Room 13B. Security Level 4A. Comply without deviation. There was no return address, no supervisor's signature, but the date was stamped for the next morning. I debated ignoring it, but something told me that would be worse. So I reported to the coordinates at dawn. A black vehicle with no license plates met me outside the city center. Inside, a man in a gray suit said nothing for the entire drive. When we arrived, we passed through 3 checkpoints, each one deeper into a zone I had never entered before. There were no signs, no guards in traditional uniform, just concrete, steel, and silence. Room 13. B was behind a reinforced door with biometric locks. Inside, it was cold, almost surgical. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, and the air smelled faintly of alcohol and iron. At first glance, the wiring system looked standard, overloaded but fixable. I started tracing the circuit panels to identify the fault. That's when I noticed the auxiliary cables. They weren't routing power to lights or HVAC. They were feeding into a partitioned chamber, soundproofed, windowless, lined with speakers and motion sensors. A single chair sat in the center, bolted to the floor, surrounded by coiled cables and what looked like EEG nodes. I followed the wires with my multimeter, heart pounding. The readings made no sense. Audio signals, not voltage, being pumped at irregular frequencies. I realized this wasn't a power issue. This was some kind of feedback system. Deliberate, designed to distort. Suddenly, I heard a low hum, not from the machinery, from behind the one-way mirror. Then a voice, mechanical, layered, repeating in monotone. You are safe. You are loyal. You remember nothing. I froze, my hand still holding the probe. Then, through a brief crack in the glass, I saw him. A man strapped to the chair, eyes glazed over, murmuring back the same phrases like a child reciting a nursery rhyme. His head twitched with every pulse of the sound. Before I could react, a hand gripped my shoulder. The suited man from the car leaned in close and whispered, "Forget what you saw. You are not here." He handed me a clipboard, told me to sign that the work was complete, told me to surrender my multimeter, told me to leave. I did. But I couldn't forget. That day, something inside me fractured. Not from what I saw, but from realizing how normal they acted, how routine it all was. This wasn't an accident. This was a machine built to erase people, and I had just rewired it. I told myself it would pass, that maybe they believed me, that maybe handing over the multimeter, signing the form, and walking out without asking questions was enough to erase me from their minds. But deep down, I knew better. 2 nights later, I returned home to find the lock on my apartment door had been changed. Not broken, changed. I had never authorized it. Inside, everything looked untouched, but my toolkit had been moved. A wrench I always left on the left side now sat on the right. The food in the cabinet was perfectly aligned. Too perfectly. They had been inside. The next morning, a man I had never seen before approached me near the substation. He smiled, handed me a cigarette I didn't ask for, and said casually, "Good work in room 13B. Not everyone can keep quiet like you." He didn't wait for a response. I went home early that day and stared at the blank wall in my living room for hours. I knew I had to leave. But how? I had no outside contacts. No family abroad. No money that wasn't state issued. But I had something else. A cousin in Ryangang province, near the Chinese border. We hadn't spoken in years. She was married to a farmer, lived off the grid, barely registered in the system. I wrote her a letter using the pre-approved postcard system, nothing suspicious. Just a note that I was coming to visit for a maintenance review of local power supplies. I attached a forged work order I had printed at the dispatch office late one night. 2 weeks later, I was granted temporary travel clearance to Ryangang. I packed only what I needed. A second uniform, my old ID badge, a wrapped tin of dried fish, and a roll of bills I had slowly accumulated from barter jobs enough to bribe one checkpoint. Maybe two if I was lucky. The train to Haisan took 3 days. At each stop, security grew tighter. Soldiers boarded to check documents, eyes scanning for fear. I learned to hold my breath without shaking, to smile without showing teeth, to answer with, "Yes, comrade," and nothing else. When I arrived in the village near the river, my cousin barely recognized me. She led me through her back field to a dugout hidden beneath sacks of rice and straw. "You're not the first," she whispered, "but you might be the last." That night, we sat in silence, drinking hot water from a tin cup. She told me that a smuggler would arrive the next morning. He would take me to a crossing point further upstream, away from the guards. The price was everything I had. I gave it without hesitation. At dawn, the smuggler appeared thin, sunburnt, missing 3 fingers. He didn't say his name, only nodded and motioned for me to follow. The trek took 8 hours through icy forests, across streams coated with thin sheets of ice, past abandoned huts riddled with bullet holes. He carried no weapon, only a small pouch of ash, which he scattered on the snow to mask our footprints. As we neared the Yalu River, I heard shouting, "Dogs." We dropped to the ground. 2 border patrol officers marched by, their rifles swinging lazily. My heart thudded against the soil like it wanted to escape before I did. One of them stopped, turned his head slightly. The smuggler didn't move. Neither did I. Then the soldier spit into the snow and kept walking. After what felt like an eternity, we crawled to the water's edge. The river wasn't wide, but it was freezing. The smuggler tied empty jugs to my waist for buoyancy and pushed me forward. The current was stronger than I thought. Halfway across, I swallowed ice water and nearly screamed from the cold. But I kept moving, stroke after stroke, numb fingers clawing at darkness. Then, gravel. Shoreline. A hand pulled me up. I was in China. The smuggler didn't stay. He disappeared into the trees without a word. I stumbled into the outskirts of a farming village, soaking wet and shivering. A church steeple peeked through the morning fog. I followed it. The pastor who opened the door didn't ask questions. He led me to a basement, wrapped me in a blanket, and handed me warm porridge. For the first time in my life, no one looked at me with suspicion. No one asked what I had seen. They only asked if I was hungry, if I could sleep. I stayed there for weeks, hidden, healed, slowly regaining the feeling in my legs and the courage in my spine. Eventually, the pastor contacted a South Korean consulate through an underground network. I was moved from town to town, smuggled through checkpoints with forged IDs in silence. 6 months later, I stepped onto a flight bound for Seoul. No family, no passport, no real name. But I was alive. When I first stepped into the Hanawan Resettlement Center, I thought I had entered a dream. The floors were warm beneath my feet. Not just dry warm. The lights stayed on without flickering. Every door had a lock that opened from the inside. The air didn't smell of mildew or fear, but of lemon and soap. They handed me a towel, a real towel, fluffy, white, folded perfectly. Then came the meals. Hot rice, fried chicken, soup that wasn't thin like gray water, and fruit, fresh, sweet fruit. A slice of melon melted on my tongue and I nearly cried. Not because it was delicious, but because I hadn't tasted anything that alive in decades. Every night, we sat in rooms with other defectors and talked about freedom, about choices, about how to cross the street. A counselor explained how to use a debit card, how to buy groceries, how to take the subway. We practiced smiling back when someone said hello. I remember holding a smartphone for the first time. It glowed like magic. I didn't know what to do with it at first. But then someone showed me how to open YouTube. I typed in Pyongyang and watched a foreigner walk its streets, pointing out monuments I had passed all my life. Only now they looked like props, like lies filmed on a set. Late one night, I searched for room 13B. Nothing came up, not even rumors. It was as if it never existed, but I knew better. Adapting to South Korea was harder than I thought. The speed, the noise, the freedom, it overwhelmed me. Crossing the street without being watched felt like breaking the law. Saying no felt dangerous. Looking people in the eye made me flinch. Sometimes, I would wake up in the middle of the night, expecting a knock on the door, expecting to be taken back. At Hanawan, we were given a small monthly stipend. I used mine to buy tools, not because I needed to fix anything, but because the weight of them in my hand made me feel real again. I would disassemble and reassemble old radios in the dormitory, just to remind myself I still had control over something. One of the teachers there asked me once, "What's the biggest change for you?" I said, "The silence here isn't dangerous." She didn't understand what I meant, but I didn't expect her to. Sometimes, I wonder if anyone even remembers room 13B, the men who guarded it, the man strapped inside, the wires I followed like veins into the heart of something unspeakable. Maybe they've changed the name by now. Maybe it's room 14A. Or maybe it never had a name at all, just a purpose too dark to live in daylight. I keep thinking about that voice. You are safe. You are loyal. You remember nothing. But I remember everything. I remember the hum of the generators, the coldness of the floor, the clipboard in my hand as I signed away my silence. I remember how the man's lips moved even after the speakers stopped, still repeating the words as if they were stitched into his brain. I escaped the building. I escaped the country. But I did not escape what I saw. Now, I live in a city that pulses with light. People rush past me with coffee in hand and headphones in their ears. No one bows out of fear. No one whispers. The silence here is not suspicious. The electricity stays on even when no one's watching. I fix things when I can. Radios, lamps, the occasional wall socket. People say I'm good with my hands. But what they don't know is I'm still trying to repair something inside me. Some nights, I dream of wires, of hidden doors, of voices behind glass. I wake up drenched in sweat, gripping the edge of my mattress like a lifeline. But then I see the city lights outside my window unflickering, bright, real, and I remind myself, I am no longer in room 13B. I am no longer a tool in their machine. I am still haunted, but I am free, and that, I've learned, is enough.